I am going to welcome our guest today, so Mariah Finley. So if you came on expecting Morgan Brown, he sends his apologies. He got pulled into a last minute emergency board meeting. And instead of canceling the session, I called up my good friend Mariah. I was like, Mariah, you're a rock star. You've been through the journey, both as a serial entrepreneur and multiple stints in big tech and startups and you are such a great speaker and you have so many leadership lessons to impart with us. So will you please do this session? And Mariah, of course, being the person that she dropped her other meeting and she was like, of course, I'm going to help you out. And so we are so grateful to have you here. And it's an honor and a privilege, Mariah. So first of all, if you could share with the group a little bit about yourself and share a little bit about your career journey or arc so that the group knows, like, who's speaking in front of them
Well,
today.
let me first of all apologize for not being Morgan, who sounded fabulous. So you will maybe get a little less AI and a little more big company and startup. So quick thing about me, I've spent the last 5 years at Google, where I run two businesses for Google. I run our Google stores and Google Fi, which is our wireless carrier. Um, Prior to Google, I actually spent 10 years as a startup founder. So venture-backed startups, e-commerce, subscription. The first one was acquired by a public company. The second was killed by COVID. Um, Prior to that, I was at PayPal and eBay, which is why I know Ha and Deb so well. At PayPal, I ran the consumer site and started PayPal Mobile, and at eBay, I ran consumer PM. And part of that, I was at a mobile startup in the like super early days, running product. And prior to that, I was at Netscape and AOL. I also teach at Stanford. So I've taught for the last 10 years, and I've been on public board, private board, and nonprofit. Yeah, that's a little bit about me.
And then to answer the prompt that I dropped in, so if you were to go back and tell your younger self, like, what's the leadership wisdom that you would impart on your younger self?
Yeah, actually, my most important one would be very careful about making decisions tied to ego, and um and don't let the vestiges of success be what you seek. Let actually the growth.
Hmm. Tell Elaborate on that a little bit more. Like, give us some
Well, I mean,
examples.
it's like if you want to know, it's funny. I do a lot of talks, and people are like, "Oh my God, you've had such a risky career," and I'm like, "Yeah, actually, my biggest mistakes were failure to take risk." So I remember I was coming out. I became senior really early. Like I became a director like 2 years into my working career and started managing teams. So anyway, so I had finished running product at this kind of sort of high flying startup. And then I interviewed, this is 2004. I interview at Google with like Marissa and Susan. And I was like their first outside interview for a director of PM. And they came back and they're like, well, we won't make you director PM, but we'll make you a senior PM. And I turned them down because I was like, oh, no, 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 no. I should be a director. And then I went to PayPal and I was director. But like, I mean, it was kind of a stupid decision. Like I should have just bet that like, no, I'm really good at what I do. I'll come in and be great at it, you know? And so it's just like it was an interesting one. And by the way, I'm not like a person who regrets. Like my career was interesting. I've enjoyed it. But it's like a weird bad decision where it was tied up in like the outward vestiges of what I would be versus just kind of betting on myself. And let's just be
Hmm.
clear, if I joined Google in 2004, that probably would have been like a lucrative outcome. Yeah, like
I think you're probably doing okay right now,
yeah, no, I don't,
it,
this isn't like I'm mad at myself.
yeah.
It's more just to introspect. Do you choose from a place of growth or do you choose from a place of other people's judging
Mm.
you? I'll tell one funny story about that and I'll go. I remember when I was in my late 20s, I had this mentor who had taken two companies public. And at the time I thought she was really old and senior. I'm pretty sure she was my age now, but we'll let that go. And then she's like, Mariah, my biggest hope for you is that you stop caring what other people think of you. I'm like 28 years old. She's like, but I give you through your 40s to figure this out. So there you go. Yes. So don't live in the perspective what others think of you. That would be the
Yeah.
lesson I would tell my adorable younger self.
Yeah. I remember in business school, I was telling folks that that there was this company that I was really interested in called eBay, and that I wanted to get a job there and join. And by that point, consumer was dead. Everybody was going off to mobile and infrastructure, and so my friends would like laugh at me, but it kind of worked out okay.
It
It
all
kind of,
works out. Yeah, yeah. To quote Dolly Parton, everything's going to be okay. It's going to
yeah.
be okay. Yeah. What are your questions?
Um, Yeah, well, so this group, is really interested in not just leadership lessons, but also failures. So, like, I mean, I'd love to hear, like, have there moments in life where you just kind of utterly failed, and what did you learn, and and yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll do two. Maybe I'll start with one that was a little bit outside my control, but it doesn't change what it felt like, and then one that was more in my control. So, you know, uh, I my first startup was, pretty successful. I sold it. It was a good outcome for me and the team. At the time, I like interviewed for like fancy CPOs at unicorns and and I like turned them all down because I was like, no, 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 I want to go again. I want to see if I can go long. And early in running my startup, like I got a pretty lucrative acquisition offer, and I'm like, no, 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 I want to go long. So I'm running the startup, was doing relatively well. I prepared my Series B fundraising deck. I'm ready to go out. This is March of 2020. COVID hits, and like my business disappears overnight. And it was a fashion styling business for professional women. So, like people were like hoarding toilet paper. They really did not need clothes for work. And it was very unclear what happened. And I remember waking up every morning and like I do the same where I like put my eye drops in and sit there and like absorb them. And my first thought every morning was like, you suck. And I was like, oh, okay, let's reframe. You don't suck. The situation sucks. And then, I had to lay off 150 people. I called every single one of them. It took like 3 days. It was interesting to see something you built just disappear overnight. And what I
Mm,
would say is, even though like, I don't think I could have foreseen it, um, it didn't mean it didn't hurt a lot and feel really bad. And like you felt like you let a lot of people down. Um, but I often say it was my least successful thing I ever did. But karmically, like, I wound the company down. I ended up going to Google and like I actually love my job. And I never thought I'd go back to big tech. And I love my job. So it's interesting that like my kind of worst thing I did actually ended up with a job I love. And then another mistake that I'd say was like more was really about me. And it's interesting. This is when I was sort of in my late 20s, maybe like 29. I was running product for a startup. I had joined quite early, maybe like employee 6 or 10 or something like that. And like I was sort of in charge of product, I was sort of in charge of the company plan. Like I was bringing kind of that very task focused, very like make it happen energy. And like they kind of like, but the company was getting bigger. And I got like a new boss who was more like enterprise sales. And they were kind of sending me what I now see as signals that they wanted me to change my behavior. But I wasn't like getting what they were putting down. And then eventually, like I decided to leave. And at the time, I was like really offended that the CEO like changed how they valued me and like didn't they understand everything I did? And it's funny how then after doing two startups and watching how they changed over time and what we needed from people changed, I have a lot of empathy for what the CEO was trying to tell me. And it was just like a very stark lesson that the thing that makes you sort of magical and great and performant is actually quite situational dependent. And so
mm,
if you're not absorbing that the situation changed, it's actually you who's wrong, not them. But at the time, I'll say I was completely offended. Yeah, yeah.
mm,
Only with perspective and history do I
for sure.
understand that like I wasn't adjusting to what they wanted.
Mm. Um, Yeah, I mean, I want to open it up to the audience, like if there's any follow-up questions too, because I want to make this a little bit interactive. We don't have to wait for questions at the end. The next section I want to go into is like boards and board service, but like, um, anybody want to sort of follow up with any questions? Kristen, you want to just go off mute? Off mute?
Oh, wait.
Sure.
Can you
Hi,
say it out loud?
Yeah.
Kristen Broman. And my question is, how did you, if you could kind of story tell, or how might you recommend somebody get into teaching, also being on boards, and then how do you balance it all while working full time with Google?
Okay, there's like three of those questions. Well, let's start
Yeah.
with the teaching one. My actual answer, so I've been teaching at Stanford for 10 years, 9 years of classes. I took 1 year off for a medical thing. And it's interesting. It happened after I sold my first company, and my very, very close friend, Jocelyn Goldfine, had also left Meta. And it was all this, it was like this bucket list thing for us. Like, we're like, we really want to teach. So, but we had a year off, so we actually could produce the class. But the answer I always give people, and I know it sounds like kind of light, is I just asked. And I know that's like a weird, you're like, what do you mean you just asked? And to be fair, I am a Stanford CS alumni, but we went to the head of department and we're like, we'd like to teach a class. And then before we did that, we actually did a bunch of user research on students because we thought that they wanted a class on, like, I spent my whole career in product and Jocelyn spent her whole career as engineering leader. And so we thought they would want a class on like how to be a great PM or a great engineering manager. But actually, we did all these focus groups with students and they wanted a class on like how to be an employee, like how to work. And we just asked, and we didn't set the expectation that we would do it again, but then we fell in love with it. So if I were to abstract like the lesson from that, I think there are lots of, students are very thirsty for sort of the kind of skills we use day to day, be it product management or leadership or negotiation. Um, and the schools are actually quite open to it. So like one thing I highly recommend is like the GSB actually has a ton of places you can teach and mentor. Like I mentored Lean Launchpad last quarter. It was super fun. Like I've judged Startup Garage. So what I would say, and this give a similar, I'm gonna give you a similar advice on boards, is like put yourself out there. Like the universe can't know what you want if you don't tell people in the universe. It's like that joke where God's like, I don't win the lottery, I don't win the lottery. And God's like, meet me halfway, buy a ticket. Um, but just go tell people that you're interested in it. Guest speaking is a good strategy. But then if you want to teach a whole class, my advice is teach with a friend. Because it takes, one, it's much more fun. You get to see your friend every week. And if you're working full time, like almost every semester, I have to take at least like one international trip, or she does, but it's never the same time. So, but I will say teaching is like pure joy, like pure joy. Like it is like a source of, like, I don't know how to explain it. Like I even like when we stay in touch with our students, I had a one-on-one with one of my students from like 9 years ago who just had a baby and is like an engineering manager and changing jobs. And so, I helped a student recently do his first PIP as a startup founder. It's really rewarding. So what I would say is put yourself out there and try it. It is actually, I do think it might be the long game of what you want to do when we all grow up. I mean, at least for me, it's probably my deepest professional joy. Okay, there are more questions in there. Do
Yeah,
you want
there
me
were
to?
more questions. Well, first of all, the one lesson that you imparted that so resonate with is like you got to put yourself out there because people don't know. And I know that every sort of leap that I've made in my career, it was just because I asked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
So,
that's actually in some sense my feedback on boards. Like,
yeah,
um,
tell us more.
yeah, I mean, the most efficient way to get a board is tell the people half a step fancier than you that you want a board. And like, I know this is not the advice other people give, but there's a set of people you can only be on a couple. Like, if you're working, you can only be on one board. If you're not working, you're limited to probably three. But like, and so there's the same set of people who get asked again and again to be on boards. So like, you just got to tell them that you would like to be on a board. And like my first board, not the startup, my first public board, my like dear friend Sukhinder Singh Caskey, who's like one of the most wonderful people I know. I mean, I just love her to the ends of the earth. Like they called her up. She already had a bunch of boards. She's like, you should talk to Mariah. And like they wouldn't have thought of me. Like I wouldn't have been on their list. And then so step one is tell people who get called a lot. Like that would be my most efficient path. And then step two is don't bitch and moan when they like go over the top when they ask you for something. Like sometimes I'm on this like the Facebook groups where people are asking me to do stuff and they're not paying me. I'm like, you people are being very immature. So like when Fossil like was like, oh, we're thinking about this company and like, what do you think about them? And I was like, I didn't just write a short note back. I like used their product. I analyzed them. I wrote like a 2-page doc on like where I thought it'd fit in and why it would work and why it wouldn't work. And like, I actually leaned into being helpful as my first strategy. And I would say same for my startup board. I you know, the founders went to Stanford with me and they would call me up and talk about the product. And so I'd meet with them, we talk product, we'd iterate. And then eventually they just asked me to join the board because I was being helpful. And then on the boards, I kept the strategy of try to be helpful. Like meet with the execs that are sort of in my domain. At the startup one, I would meet regularly with the CEO and the CTO and talk through issues with them. If sometimes I would act like help the board because I was the independent, like help sort of figure out what's going on the whole board and help resolve it. Yeah.
Thank you. I love that. Plus one to the best way to get on boards is to talk to friends who are on boards because they get called on a lot. So
Yeah.
I know tonight we're having dinner with Deb Lou. I know she's on the board of Intuit and she got her first board because
Oh,
Cheryl
Cheryl.
Sandberg,
Yeah.
recommended her.
Yeah.
And
And you
and
got to
then
get
I
out
think
there.
the event that we're going to tonight is getting on boards. So yeah, so love that. And then, but the other thing is that it's not just getting in front of folks that who can help you get on boards. It's like give them a reason to have
Yes.
you to think about you first, right? So it's not just one coffee meeting. It's like how can you do work or a project or have them understand who you are and your capabilities and skill set.
And that's in essence what I did both times. Like it was
Yeah.
just a very natural. Like I answered the questions they gave me as I would answer them. I wasn't trying. I mean, the one thing about boards is you really only want to be on the board if they actually uniquely want what you're good at. So
Mhm.
one thing I would do if you're getting called by a board from a recruiter, I would listen very carefully to what they think they're looking for. By the way, I joke about board though, unless you're audit certified. If you're audit certified, you can just have your choice of boards. Like, you're great. They always need audit certified people. But for most of the rest of us, it's listen to what they think they're solving for. Are they solving for like we don't have enough product innovation? Like we don't think our head of product is like innovative enough. Are they solving for like a scale issue? Are they solving for like we're heading towards M&A? Like in like when I joined Fossil, they really wanted to enter smartwatches. And so they were thinking about like, how do I think about acquisitions of technology companies, right? And so like knowing what they're solving for and then actually like doing some work and seeing if you actually are their solve. It's interesting. One of the guys who works for me, who I love, he got asked to help this company and he's like, but Mariah, I don't know anything about their domain. I'm like, yeah, like I don't think that's what they want your help with. They want your help with like how to run a rigorous product org and how to scale product and how to scale processes. Like there people may be looking for different things. Yeah. And it is really rewarding to be on a board, I would say. It's an interesting chance to porpoise up and have perspective about your own job. Like sometimes as a startup CEO, I'm like, well, am I like wasting time being on a board? Shouldn't I be just working all the time on my startup? But what I realized is every time I went, I came back like a little, like it had this effect of causing me to think at a different level that caused me to have kind of different insights.
Thank you. Chris, I know you had one more question in there about like being a mom and balancing it all. Is that
Yeah. Do you want that one too?
right?
We can do that one.
Did I get that right?
Um, well, it's interesting. My boys are 17 and 15 now, but when I started my first startup, my sons were 3, 1, and my husband decided to commute to Arizona 5 days a week to run like a really large molecular oncology diagnostic business. But that seemed like totally rational in hindsight. Um, but what I don't know, my advice is a little bit trite. It probably is, but it's actually worked for me. I'm going to tell you, I actually don't find it that stressful. And I know there's a whole like, isn't it so stressful? But I don't find it that stressful. And there's a few thoughts of that. One, I have who you marry. It's the most important thing you can do. I'm up with Cheryl on that. There's a funny story once where like the boys were little and I was being dropped off to go on a Napa girls trip. And like I keep giving all this financial, like, oh, can you cut this? Can you move that? And I get off the phone and they're like, who are you talking to? I'm like, oh, I'm talking to Greg. They're like, So he's watching the boys and building your model this week. And I'm like, yeah, like some girls get flowers. I get models. I mean, really. So, I mean, I have a super helpful husband, like even like so helpful, like in my early stage, like when the finance people would do the diligence, he's like, yeah, this is not good enough. I'd wake up and I'd have perfect diligence. So very helpful husband. Two, we have a lot of help. Like I have chosen in life, to only work on to spend time on things I care about, which are my work, my exercise, my family, and my friends. And also I have this thing called I drop the policy of perfection. And and I was a little Hermione. I mean, I'm still a little like Hermione, like at Stanford, I was like, must be perfect at all things all the time. Work must be perfect. But I was like, I don't need to be perfect in my house. I don't need to and we're willing to be wrong. Like we're willing to like forget to pay I like occasionally get called like until we automate everything. I remember being sent to collections because I didn't open my mail and like I didn't pay the bill. I'm like, I don't know. And I didn't think to myself, bad you. I thought, you live and you learn, that was worth the trade-off for me. So I'm not judging myself on the things that are outside of my core values. And then, and you really have to compartmentalize. Like what I would say is, I remember an experience once when I was at PayPal and we went to this social thing. And one of my friends was there too. And she was also a director of PayPal. And I noticed we were at this wedding in this tropical location. She worked all the time and I didn't work all the time. And I was like, and part of it is your choice of how you show up. And in particularly as a startup CEO, what I would say, and I talk to my friends who are startup CEO, the work is infinite. But you forget that as the founder, you must have fuel left in the tank. Because what's going to happen is you're running a marathon and something important happens. Like something bad could happen or something exciting could happen. But you must have energy to change from marathon pace to sprint pace. And if you don't, no one will. So if you only run at sprint pace, you cannot adjust when your team needs it. And I think if you really think about it, it is the fiduciarily smart way to do it. Yeah. I don't know. That was a lot of babbling.
That was a mic drop there because I think it is so easy to get caught in the trap of like being busy and
Yeah.
busy moves you forward and how there's no other way to be. And
Yeah.
but I love
There's
what
other ways to be. You will be smarter if you go. I mean, I'm very fast paced, but yeah. And then yeah.
awesome. Do other folks have questions? I mean, I have a whole long laundry list of questions, but I do want to set this up as an AMA. So, does anybody else have burning questions for Mariah that you want to just go off camera or sorry, go off mute? I saw Kia.
Hey, I'm Kia. I asked this in chat, but AI is changing our industry in general as knowledge workers. What advice would you give to employees and leaders in this new epic that we're
Yeah.
embarking on?
I mean, it's such a fun phase. Like, I mean, by the way, I am old enough that I was a computer scientist in the late 90s when the greatest minds thought it would never work. So I'm just like, it's amazing. What I would say is just like really use it all the time. I mean, this is like a weird personal example, but when my junior in high school, he was like working on a research project for a professor and he had to figure out like which disease I'm going to go after. And I'm like, well, let's go to like deep research and like, let's like ask like about different disease states and this and that. And just like, it's kind of magical. So like using it, like I use it to get to work, but I use it every time I have like we used it to both work on his research project and we used it to work on his promposal. It was actually pretty good. I use it when I plan trips. And so it's like one is just immerse yourself in the tools is sort of the obvious. And then it's shocking how good it is, like separate from even consumer facing AI innovation, like the extent to which we're using it just for productivity in our teams is amazing. Like, the funniest one, this is not a good use case, but my team made a Mariah gym and like it actually like it just they trained it on all these talks our meetings and then like the data of our products and like it will be like it will answer as me. It is actually my family found it like remarkably amusing, but
I
like
did the
just
same
yeah.
for myself. I had people just ask initially that, and the answer is not good enough. If it's not good enough, escalate to me. It works
Yeah,
great.
yeah. No, she's actually, I mean, she's pretty wordy, I have to say. I mean, I'm a little wordy, but she's really wordy. But just we're using it like in every frontier. And then at work, like I do think we're hosting a lot of AI days, a lot of like make project. Like it's interesting, like to see how much it's changing. Yeah. I mean, I know that's like a funny answer. I think the only way to do is jump in and try to go native.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do here too.
Yeah.
Just AI for everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't remember the last time I opened up Google search. So I,
Hmm.
yeah.
Don't tell that to Mariah. That's not nice.
You should try AI.
Sorry, you're not working on search though. Right. But yeah, it is changing the way I'm doing things for sure. Kristen, did you want to hop on and ask a question? No. A- any other questions from the group?
I've got one.
Brad.
Um, how do you stay informed? What do you read? What do you listen to? Who do you talk to? Where do you go? I'm curious.
Yeah, I will say my favorite person is Ben Thompson at Stratechery. I don't know if you guys listen to him,
The
but
email?
I used to do email. I switched to the verbal version, to the podcast
Okay.
versions of him. Um, I really like him. I will admit, I kind of admit sheepishly that I do really like the All In podcast. Uh, I wouldn't, it's a real sheepish admit, to be clear. Like, because I don't always agree with them, but I think it was like an anthropological study of the valley and how we're changing. And then obviously I read the news. And then actually we're very lucky. They do this really intense competitive thing every week at work. And I kind of pour through all of it, which is like a really awesome summary of what everyone
But
is.
you get a dossier of sorts?
Yeah, which is pretty nice. And then I listen to a bunch of health podcasts because it's like a weird hobby. Yeah. Yeah. What do you
Right.
listen to, Brad? Or read?
I listen to, first of all, I can't watch TV news anymore because it's inflammatory by its nature. But I listen to podcasts and I'm totally addicted to listening to an interview for 45 minutes as opposed to 45 seconds or 45 words.
Yeah.
And it's just so wonderful to hear someone in depth. So I get through as many as I can at 2x or 2.5x. And I
2.5x. Wow, you got fast ears.
well, yeah, I mean, there's some error rate, but I can't. With real people, I want to, enjoy the wine and have a nice slow conversation. But yeah, for podcasts, I guess I've trained myself and to absorb something at that rate. But yeah, podcasts are just magical for me because you get to hear directly from the source, long form, like it or don't like it, you know where they stand, and it gets beyond the soundbite. So I've really enjoyed that.
I don't,
Deb
I
Lou
do
piece
listen.
every week too. My friend Deb Lou, who's also a friend of I do read her. I read her
Oh,
perspectives.
he's so
She
great.
did a good one on books she read, and I've just been cranking through them.
Yeah, everybody subscribes to Deb's Substack. She writes weekly. I don't know how she can crank out so much content, but she is full of wisdom and advice. And
Yeah.
she's working on her second book now on career transitions. So I'm excited to get that book. Um, any other questions? Otherwise, I have a whole list of questions I'm going to go through. I'm gonna go through my questions then, and maybe some folks will be bold enough to come off of mute or add additional questions in the chat. So Moira, let's talk about product. Talk about product at like big companies versus startups, and what have you learned along the way around building amazing products that customers love?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And I think there's a little bit the difference between 0 to 1 and an ongoing product. I'll take a second on ongoing products. Like when I was at eBay, I took over the eBay consumer side. I've taken over some products here. And one thing I think is people forget to look at their product with clear. I actually think product managers need to have what I call brand new eyes. Like, don't see it as someone would see it the first time, not all the legacy of decisions you made. Like, I remember when I went from PayPal to eBay, and like, it was just interesting. Like, it's also important to make sure your org is working on the right thing. I got there and we had people staffed on like kind of these like niche areas, like let's go build this whole neighborhood thing, but there wasn't a single PM on search, and nobody had like looked at view item in a long time, and it had this like weird legacy decision where images were small because storage used to cost money, and I was like, yeah, why don't we fix that? Or like, why don't we tend to search? And so one thing I think people way underestimate in existing products is like, there's what I call product management debt that you should go back and look at again, and like, don't assume all of it. The other thing, I've done a lot of e-commerce and a lot of subscriptions, and just, you almost always get paid every time you remove friction, like every time. And people are always kind of amazed by it. I'm like, yeah, like it just like, so like on existing products, like trying to treat them with fresh eyes and like keep them well tended like a garden. Don't just keep planting new trees, like tend the ones you have. And it sounds like a little boring, but it actually tends to pay off very well. In 0 to 1, so I did 0 to 1 at PayPal, and I've done 0 to 1 at a bunch of startups. This is one where it's, clearly much easier in a startup because like that's your whole point. Um, and the thing I would tell you is again, there's a humility in building a 0 to 1 product. Like what you think is why people want it is sometimes right and sometimes completely wrong. And I remember when I was building my first startup, which was like a subscription box for parents of babies. And I was like, oh, it's like, this is very much my personality. It's going to be like developmental and like teething and tummy time and like kind of like a very earnest educational thing. But I hired very good people and they produced it. And we had a survey that went out every month. And then we'd really read through what it said and like read through with like open heart and an open mind. And what we actually learned is that's not what mom wanted. She wanted to feel good about herself on a bad day, to feel like parenting was hard, but she was making good choices and sometimes to have a treat. And like, it was just interesting. What we thought was true wasn't true. And so I think there's this interesting, and I still do this in my current role. We have a ton of NPS and surveys and just try to understand what people really want. So I think there's a skill in all the product, which is like really hear what they're telling you. Don't hear it framed through your lens. Like have like real humility about that. And then don't see all the reasons why you did in the past, see it fresh. And the final sort of thing I often tell people in product is like, you have an idea, you compromise, there might be a technical constraint, a business constraint, a cross-functional collaboration constraint, and then you produce an outcome. And then you got to ask yourself again, was that outcome worthy of the problem we set out to solve? Like, was it compromised way too much, or was it good enough? Yeah, so there's some thoughts.
I'm sorry, my internet just froze for a second there. Something that you said, Mariah, just really hit home for me, which is like just really understanding what your customers are really asking for. So I think for the longest time I was running surveys where I'm just trying to extract data and learnings, and I'm like, but to answer what question? And so this week I did a non-member survey actually to non-Sidebar members, and it was fascinating that like what I assumed was true, people told me we're not interested in that, and I was like, whoa. It's making me rethink everything. But I was, if I would have put $100 betting women on it, I would have bet that they would have loved it. And they're like, no, that's not the problem you're looking to solve. So that definitely resonated with me. What other product questions should we ask Mariah? Anybody want to come off of mute and ask? What about product failures, Mariah? Anything that you've learned from like some disastrous product launches?
Yeah. You know, I, I don't know that I've had any, let me think about that, massive failures. I mean, I've had things that didn't work as well as we expected, but, well, I mean, I'll give you two smallish examples. They're not massive failures, right? But they sort of tell you something about culture. I mean, these are small failures, but small failures actually are interesting and they matter. Is when I was running the subscription box startup a long time ago, like for 1 month, we just sent a box that was like a dud. Like people freaking hated it. And this was back when Facebook was more organic. So we had this community and everyone was up in arms. Like they were just so upset. And it was clear, and we saw it in the feedback. And then we just chose to be really honest to the community. Like, we know we messed up. We know you didn't like this. And then I actually stopped the company for like a few days and made everyone answer, anyone who wrote in, I made them answer like a really thoughtful note on why. And it wasn't, by the way, this wasn't like we did something controversial. They just like, it wasn't like a bad thing. They just didn't like it. And so just being really authentic about it was actually really helpful. And people were very sharing. And then not exactly failures, but I think it's a little like the other where like your intuition is just wrong. Um, I remember at the styling company, we sort of thought, um, oh, if we like there's a really long quiz and that must hurt conversion. So we like did all this work to have like a shorter quiz and do all this stuff. And then like it didn't actually help. Like we did get more conversion, but if you measured on an LTV basis, you were better off keeping the longer one. So it was just like an interesting question where your intuition was actually wrong. And
Mm.
afterwards you can kind of see why. Um, um, yeah. Okay, but I think those are, I can't think of any massive ones where like we just like did it. It was like terrible.
Yeah, they still get some really, really great lessons. Kia, did you you had something in the chat?
Yeah, I want to know how you measure, monitor the health of your go-to-market function as a senior leader, and what are the metrics or signals that you're looking at most frequently, and when do you escalate to the team?
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me start with my startups because that's probably the easiest to explain. Um, and it really like they were subscriptions, so it really is your CAC and your LTV and your gross margin, like at the simplest level, because those numbers will rule them all. I remember once talking to a venture capitalist friend of mine about consumer businesses. He's like, "Don't even tell me the business, just show me the P&L." That's one theory to look at it. But like, but really and truly, like when I was running my startup, we had a daily stand up where we reviewed CAC and LTV retention and gross margin, basically. And I would say even today, like, I would say we add more brand awareness metrics to that. Like, so in addition, because those are somewhat lower funnel metrics, um, but then we would add more like brand consideration and brand awareness. Yeah. But as a startup, I didn't manage, I didn't measure brand consideration, brand awareness.
Makes
But I
sense.
mean, I do live by the Bible of CAC to LTV. Yeah. And I'm
I'm
a big believer in like, don't look at it, like really double click on it. Like by unfurling it all, you see a lot more insights. Yeah. How do you manage it, Kia? Like, what do you look at?
Yeah, we also do CAC to LTV. I work at a VC, so we're looking at our portfolio companies. So subscription-based products, we do CAC to LTV. Um, and we're at less granularity than someone who's actually operating the company, but that's just one of our health metrics that we're constantly looking at. Um,
Yeah.
Brand awareness is also important for us, and then investor sentiment, frequent updates, things like that are just kind of our health signals.
Mm. Oh, whether they update you. Yeah. It is a good secret to, I mean, how to manage your board is another thing we could talk about, but being
For
like
sure.
super authentic and honest and frequent about your communication is a,
Yeah, our best founders are monthly or faster.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I moved away from decks for my board. I did a doc and I expected him to read it.
Yeah, we favor pros as well.
Yeah, if they didn't read it, I was like, I'll just sit here and wait. Like,
I removed the spotlight because I want to sort of encourage questions
yeah.
before we hop off. And then in about 5 minutes, I'm going to throw up the survey NPS question because we always collect feedback and share it with our speakers. So
Any more
I
questions?
I have one question.
Yes.
Sorry. Hey, I have a question. Like, I work in a startup, and as a startup leader, you always have limited with constraint, but you always challenge to do some big thinking, bring something newer, which would improving your new market areas. Is like, how will you advise somebody in leaders in this role to like to think big and bring some innovation which can expand your TAM beyond what you have been addressing right now. But given that you are restrained with resources of the
Yeah.
spend and the times.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a funny answer for you. I'll tell you a story and then I'll answer it. So I remember in my first startup, I had raised my Series A and we were doing these boxes, like subscription boxes, and we had like this add-on commerce where you could add to the box every month, very lucrative. And then, one of my board members who I love, I raised money from the same firm twice in two different companies. He's like, we should also do this community because you have this active community. So I actually started a third thing. Then I realized I was kind of burning too much money and did a layoff and went back to two things. And so I tell you this story mostly because depending on the phase you're at, that instinct could very well be wrong. What I would say, depending on the phase you're at, this is more early advice, you should only try to do two. Like I used to, going back to Kia's point about like how you manage board, like I would actually create themes. Like for these next 2 months or 3 months, this is what we will focus on. We will focus on improving gross margin of the product, or we will focus on opening up this. But the secret is the reason I get nervous when they say go find new, it is almost always the case that harvesting the stuff you are in will have higher payoff. And so how would I explain this? It feels sexy to do a new thing, but are you doing it? I'm not telling you, Sheetal, I'm just saying, is that advice coming because they're actually worried that the thing we're actually doing ain't going to work? Then you should just honestly admit it to yourself and then go into an iteration mode. Or if you think it's going to work, you almost certainly haven't optimized it enough and extracted the maximum value out of it. So, there's many styles of strategy. And this actually comes up for me at big companies too, where people want to do sexy strategies. And, and I've done some of that in my life. Like I was lucky enough to get to launch PayPal Mobile, which is really important. And but I'll tell you, if I was a startup, you get paid for watching very carefully the business you're in and making it work better. So don't be afraid to sell that your most strategic thing is like you are going to dramatically improve the business by focusing on the fundamentals. But I mean, and maybe PMs come in styles. I am, definitely a fundamentals person. Like each business I take over, I clean up the product, I improve the quality, I fix the business, But I would just be careful that stuff isn't like that stuff usually, if for a pure financial standpoint, like a return on investment, like I do a lot of angel investing as well. That stuff does pay off. Yeah.
That
Doing
sticks.
too much.
That's definitely sticks to me. Like just like as you come in, I think as core, if you clean up the things that you are there, that gives you long-term value. But again, there's always this pressure from the board, like you need to do something
What I would
else.
say is who lives, who dies, who tells the story. The pushback I would have is, are you telling the story of what you're doing well enough? Yeah. Like your board is actually very susceptible to like, are you framing the problem, the solution, what you're doing correctly? And so if they don't value it, you need to show them. Like if not like prove it, but like, here's my other advice on boards while I have you, if you're a startup founder. This is unrelated. You didn't ask me this question. I'm going to answer it just because it's like, I thought it was really helpful. So when I had my first startup, I had a very illustrious board. And so when they would give me advice, I'm like, well, they've taken all, they're very successful. If they have advice, I should do it, right? They're like, they've done all this. And then on my second startup, I realized something quite important, which is they were very illustrious. They had seen many things, but they weren't in the weeds of what I was doing day to day. So then I changed my framing, which is also how I manage my bosses at big companies. I listen very carefully to why they're pushing on something. Like what insight do they have? Like they are seeing way more than I'm seeing, right? Because I'm looking down at one thing and they're looking out. But what I do is I listen to what insight they're doing and I like a little bit ignore the specific recommendation because their recommendation is likely actually wrong, but we should honor why they made it because it could very well be right. That makes sense?
Makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Does
Thank
anybody have another question?
I think Elena had a question.
Yeah, I think Elena got beaten by the buzzer got beat.
That's
Yeah.
okay. That's all right. I have a slightly different question. So I've worked at a ton of startups, been early stage, later stage, also incubator within larger companies. And one thing I'm quite passionate about is building really high performing teams, ones that really sing. You've seen the small stage and also are part of a larger company. And I'm just would love your perspective on what you think are the ingredients for a high performing team.
Yeah, so I actually also love building high performing teams. And a bunch of people from my first startup worked for me a second, and I think I have a great team at Google. Um, it- so let's start with startups. I mean, the lessons might be the same. You know, the first thing I would say about startups is people are making a borderline irrational bet by coming to work at an early stage startup. So thus, you owe them trust and transparency. So at a startup, like every board meeting, I would sit
Laughing
down
because that so often that doesn't happen.
yeah, I mean, I would review the board material except for personnel or comp issues with the company, including cash balance, right? And so one, you owe this deep honesty because they like, I mean, if you really think about it, they were crazy to join you, right? And so you owe them something really deeply. And then my personal style of management, I once had someone describe me like somebody who worked for me many years ago. They're like, Mariah's a supportive hard ass, which I was like, at the time, I was very offended. I was like, what do you mean? I'm a hard ass. And I was like, yeah, I guess that's kind of right. So I tend to have very, very high bars of expectations, but I'm like a very like coach and development oriented. Um, and so I hold my team to a very rigorous standard. Like um, like I've seen all the like even a big company, like I've seen the material before they come in. I have really probing questions. But then I think people do their greatest work. So I actually am much more on the we're a sports team, not a family. Yeah.
Mm.
Like I would have traded Clay, even though he did give many years of service because Butler is doing great. Well, sad about the injury. And so, but I think holding people to a high standard, but also supporting them. And then I'm like not being afraid to make bad decisions, like don't be afraid to deal with employees who aren't working out. Like I will just tell you, and you know this, teams are hyper aware when someone's not holding their weight and they expect you to make the hard decisions. So yeah, those are some of mine. And then I give a lot of feedback and I take a lot of feedback. Yeah, like a lot.
I think, Mariah, I think you're going to have a lot of people reaching out to you wanting to work on your team.
Well, I actually love my team. My team is like one of my it is actually the most fun part of my job. Oh, and then actually the other key secret at a big company is just hire great people. Like I remember like they doubled my job and they gave me all this other stuff and they're like, how do you have time for it? I'm like, because I hired like amazing people. Like I don't understand why people are like shocked by how much time I spend on hires. They're like, do you spend like, I'm like, yeah, I might spend 100 hours to hire someone. But let me tell you, after I hire them, my life is very pleasant. And so like I will say, and you all know this, and it's obviously easier to do at a place like Google where like we can just hire the most amazing people you ever met. At startup, you have to convince people to make this very rational decision to work for you. But the better the people who work for you, the easier your world is. It really is like the most leveraged way to get productivity and results. Yeah.
Do you believe in the 10Xer, Mariah?
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also believe that average is a problem. Maybe like you want to be careful. Yeah.
Okay, we might have time for one or two more questions, but I do want to ask everybody, please, please, please take out your phone, point the camera to the QR code, and please spend a couple minutes sharing some feedback with Mariah, which I will share with her directly after this talk. But it helps us, it helps Mariah. So we would greatly appreciate it. And then there's a bit.ly here if you'd rather just type the bit.ly into your desktop and go that way. I did see a question pop up in the chat, but because I'm screen sharing, I didn't see who it was or what the question was. So feel free to go off camera, off mute.
Yeah.
Let's take one or two more questions. Well, Mariah, do you see? I can't see the chat, but who?
Yeah. I'm really behind on the chat, so I'm not sure where the question was.
I think it was one of the last ones.
Yeah. Does anybody have another question?
Okay.
I'll actually ask one here.
Yeah. Go for it.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately in terms of personal positioning statements. And I'm quite curious, how have you, Mariah, gone about understanding in a really, let's say, distilled way, what you're good at? If you could describe yourself in one sentence, how did you go about doing that?
So I'm a product manager by nature, so I just wait to see how other people describe me, is what I would say.
Mhm.
And I know that's a weird thing to say, but like I was like one time I was like looking at board list and I was like I had all these recommendations and I read what they said and they described me as strategic with a lot of execution hustle, and then the leadership I would say supportive but hard ass, and I think that's probably the most succinct encapsulation of what I'm good at. And then and I think the other thing would be I'm a great general manager, like a CEO. But then I didn't figure it, what I would say is it's what people told me. So I think it's actually the things that we're good at, people have generally told us our whole life. And you grow, like I wasn't a great general manager until like the maybe last 15 years, but I'm basically reflecting what people told me, if that makes sense. Did that answer your question? And then we talk about how to introduce yourself, which is a whole other thing, but yeah.
The advice that somebody gave me was just ask 10 of your closest friends, like what are the 3 things that, or, you know.
Define you. Yeah.
It's also about, for me, it's also about what kind of company do I want to say, here is where I'm going to have impact. Because you want to be able to tell a recruiter or whoever, I'm really good at approximately this scale of company, or I am a builder, I'm early stage, or versus a scaler versus a 0 to 1. And I'm doing a lot of reflection on, what are the things that I actually, what can I sharpen my spear on there? So I was very curious, have you given thought to
Well,
that kind of question?
I have, and I actually people do ask you that. You're right. People ask that. So what I'm really good at is I'm very, very good at 0 to 1, and I'm very good at what I'd call transforming something. Something like a business is working, but it's not great. I would actually get remarkably bored running something that's just going fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just get bored doing it. Um, but the only thing I would say is I learned that by not limiting what I chose to do. And so I'm not actually sure the self-limiting of it is that helpful in a weird way.
And see, that's what I'm struggling with, because I do feel like, at least with my experience, I can go into different spaces. I don't need to be in just this one pocket, but I also don't want to position myself as a generalist, because that's never going to get you
Yeah,
the same opportunities.
I have kind of a counterintuitive point on that. Like it's less important, like at least the way I think about it, is am I doing something with really great people that's actually growing and forcing me to do something I'm not good at today? And
Mm-hmm.
like that could show many different ways. Like I spend very little time worrying about how this is positioning me or that. Like I think if I were to encourage just one thing, which is just seek the most growth you could get and then actually work with people you, I mean, for me, like I realized over my career that I worked on all sorts of products and it's not the product itself that motivates me one way or the other. It's actually for me, I'm really people focused. Like if I don't like my boss, I'm guaranteed to quit. It doesn't matter how much money.
Hmm.
And so like my value, and like my husband's so funny. He's like, you can do it. You just remember, if you don't like your boss, you're going to leave. Like, and so for me, it's less like I've been a PM, I've been a startup founder, I've been a GM, but like I'm happiest when the people I work for be my boss or my board and the people I work with, like the process of the hard work is happy for me. So anyway, you don't have to be that. It doesn't may not be yours, but what I would actually do is go back and just ask when you were happy. And it might be the domain, it might be the size, it might be something much more intrinsic.
No, I appreciate that, Mariah.
There were so many incredible moments of wisdom. Mariah, thank you so much for spending the hour for us, for filling in for Morgan.
You have probably much more to say about AI. So.
I know that you've developed 3 dozen more fans. I was looking at the Zoom count. People stayed through the very end. So we so appreciate you. Final closing words of wisdom, and then how can people get in touch with you if you're open to having them connect with you?
Yeah, words of wisdom. Find joy in your life. Make sure do things that you enjoy.
Yeah.
For instance, I'm going to New York next week for my team, and they're like, "Did you know Beyonce's performing Wednesday?" I'm like, "Most important thing anybody told me today. Obviously, I should go to Beyonce when I'm in New York for work." So you just find joy. I guess that's what you 1 point. And then the best way to reach me is you could connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm a little flaky, or you could just email me at mariah.finley@gmail.
Okay, thank you so much. This was amazing. This is an incredible session. I'll share the feedback with you, and let's do this again. And I will see you tonight.
We could even do it like with more notice, huh? You know, if you could.
Yeah. I'm gonna have you come back for like a proper talk.
No, it's good.
And but yeah, I know for sure you've gained 36 new fans. So
Well, thank you. Thank you. It was nice to meet y'all.
Thank you.
thanks everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks, all.